Okay, we are back to locomotion in insects. We have a variety of insects. We have mosquitoes, the common ones, the houseflies, the bees, the cockroaches, dragonflies, the ants, very many, the butterfly, just like we can see in our images there. A spider is not an insect, but has similar mechanism of locomotion like insects. I repeat, a spider is not an insect, but has similar mechanism of locomotion like an insect. Remember, we are looking at locomotion in insects. How do these insects that we are seeing locomote? How do they move from one place to another? Insects locomote in two main ways. One, insects locomote by walking and running, using legs. If you've been observant, you've seen a cockroach walking. You've seen a cockroach increasing speed, thereby running. So insects can locomote by walking and running using the legs. They can also locomote by flight, using the wings. This applies to only insects that have wings. But there are particular insects, like the ants. They don't have wings, meaning they cannot fly. But all insects have legs. Remember, one of the characteristics of insects is they have 3 pairs of limbs or 3 pairs of legs. Therefore, they walk using legs. We move forward and we see, apart from locomotion, what could be the other functions of the legs in insects? Because we've said legs are used for walking and running. That is locomotion. So apart from walking and running, apart from locomotion, what could be the other functions of legs in insects? They are used to capture prey. These insects look for what to feed. So when they find other organisms which they kill and feed on, that process is what we are calling capturing. They kill, then they feed. So they may use these legs to kill and then to bring these prey or those insects, other insects they've killed, or other organisms that they have killed, and then they bring them to the mouth. That is what we are calling capturing prey. The legs are also used to collect nectar. Remember, in bees have legs. Which legs have the pollen brushes, have the pollen baskets? These legs can as well be used in collecting pollen, transporting pollen, and even nectar as well. So the legs are also used for collecting nectar and even pollen, like in bees. Then we have insects that are aquatic, insects that are found living on water and in water. So these insects that move on water move using the legs, a process we call swimming. Therefore, legs are used for swimming, especially for aquatic insects found living in water. The legs are also used for digging holes. I want you to take time. You may move outside your house. You may find particular places where holes have been created. And in those holes, you find many insects. These insects are the ones that dig these holes themselves. How do they do that? They do that using their legs. Therefore, what are the roles of the legs? Walking, capturing prey, collecting nectar and pollen, swimming for the aquatic ones, and digging the holes. We now move ahead and focus on walking in insects. Remember, we are looking at locomotion in insects. In other words, how do insects walk? This brings us to the process of walking in insects. Remember, we said among the requirements of locomotion, there must be muscles. Muscles. Therefore, insects use muscles for walking. But they have two sets of muscles. They have what we call the flexor and the extensor muscles. Flexor muscles bring about flexing or bending. Extensor, kind of straightening, extending the limb. Now the flexor and the extensor muscles, we say they are antagonistic. Antagonistic. Very, very interesting. What do we mean when we talk about antagonistic? When one set of muscles contracts, the other set of muscles relaxes. When one contracts, the other one relaxes. When the flexor muscles contract, the extensor muscles relax. When the flexor relax, the extensor contract. Therefore, the two sets of muscles are antagonistic. So when you hear of any word antagonistic, it means when one is doing something, the other is doing the opposite. Now when we look at these visuals, we can see that insect there. Look at the hind limb of that insect. At a particular point where we see that red arrow, we are seeing there is a set of muscles that is appearing green. Those muscles appearing green on the our image there are what we are calling the extensor, and the ones in blue are what we are calling the flexor muscles. When we look at this visual in with the pink heading, we can see that when the extensor muscles relax, the flexor muscles contract. When the extensor contract, the flexor relax. Therefore, the two sets of muscles are antagonistic. Now, after knowing that locomotion or walking is brought about by flexor and extensor muscles, how does the leg bend and how does it straighten? Walking in insects. Now, when the flexor muscles contract, when the flexor muscles contract, what happens to the extensor? Yes, the extensor muscles relax, and this brings about bending. Now, the muscle that contracts plays the biggest role because the other muscle is simply relaxing. That is why when the flexor contracts, it's playing the biggest role. The extensor muscles relax. What follows? The leg bends. And when the extensor muscles contract, the flexor muscles relax, thereby straightening the leg, bringing about forward movement. May we focus on this, on these drawings or these pictures or images with a pink heading. The upper one, we see extensor muscles relax, flexor contracts. What happens? The tibia flexes or the leg bends. On the other hand, when the extensor, that is now the lower image, when the extensor contracts, what happens to the flexor? They relax. What follows? The leg extends, thereby extending or straightening the leg. So in summary, walking in insects is brought about by extensor and flexor muscles. When extensor contracts, the flexor relax, straightening the leg. When the extensor relax, the flexor contracts, the leg bends. So that is about locomotion in the insects. or walking in insects. What we need to know in addition, remember the insect has 6 legs, just like we are seeing that insect in green. But when they are moving, all the 6 legs are not moved at once. On one side of the insect, the first leg or the foreleg and the hind leg, those 2 are moved together with the middle leg on the other side, while the other 3 are simply still on the ground. In other words, 3 legs move at once. The fore and the hind leg on one side, plus the middle leg on the other side. So that is about walking in insects. Walking in insects. But remember, we've said that insects locomote by walking or by flying. So we have seen locomotion by walking in insects. We now move ahead and see the adaptations of insects to move by legs. In other words, what features do they have that enable them to move by legs? 1, insects have claws at the end of their legs, which enable them to move on rough surfaces. When we look at this image here, look at that leg. The end of the leg, we can see claws. Claws are those sharp, the pointed structures at the end or at the tip. So those claws enable the insect to move on rough surfaces. In addition, there are also what we call the glandular pads. Glandular pads, or what we are labeling as the aroleum. We could call them the glandular pads or call them the aroleum. When you look at the upper drawing, it is magnifying the tip of the lower drawing. The lower one, you see where the claws are? Now just at the point of the claws, you're seeing a swelling. When you look at the upper drawing, in the middle of the 2 claws, we have that structure we are calling the aroleum or the glandular pad. Glandular pads enable the insects to move on smooth surfaces. That is why you're able to see insects like houseflies. They can even walk on structures upside down. They are able to climb walls that are smooth because they possess the glandular pads. Some other insects, like the locusts, like the grasshoppers, they have longer hind limbs. When we look at this insect that we have just seen, look at the hind limbs. The hind limbs are longer than the fore and the middle limbs. What is the advantage of that? It enables the insects to generate a greater propulsive force. A propulsive force is one that enables them to get pushed forward. Then, when we look at this leg, we can see the spines, labeled as the articulated spines. Simply call them the spines. They are found on legs of insects like a cockroach. We've all seen cockroaches. Look for a cockroach around at home. A mature one, a big one. Look at the legs. The legs have spines. Those spines are important as they enable these insects to move without slipping backwards, so that they don't slide backwards. So that is the role of the spines. In summary, what are the adaptations of insects to move by legs? We've talked about the claws. Which claws are a pair? They are pointed, they are sharp. They enable them to move on rough surfaces. They have the glandular pads or the aroleum in between the claws for movement on smooth surfaces. They have longer hind limbs to generate a greater forward force or propulsive force. And some insects, like the cockroaches, have spines on the tibia to prevent them from sliding or slipping backwards as they locomote. So those are the adaptations of insects. Remember, they also move using wings. We take another break, and when we get back, we look at movement by wings.